Let's end the war. The legions in our hearts, shed waters in our balls. The spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest. The cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded. The teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. With the semblance of a blaze, with gratitude and rage, we touch another page with delirious delight, impervious to light. This vitality and might encourages the flight. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. The world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Microphone. Check. Greetings I bring. Shout out to everyone. Shozan in the house. Black Curls, Nicer, Felicia in the house. New Park in the house. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be pulling a rescue mission today. Yes. From right here, downtown Los Angeles, we will be trying to rescue from the graveyard of cliches, this word called leverage. And yeah, it's been a couple of nights out here in downtown Los Angeles. I did a stream in my first night here, which was Monday, and that went well, I think. So welcome back to some more musings as we end 2020. And let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, leverage is a cliche word with which we form cliche sentences and then we proceed to ignore, because cliches are where great practical truths go to die, go to be ignored. Happy New Year back to you, Nicer. And we watch the chat. And Red sings the blues. Pops out and says, what's up or sup, Ike. I say sup, sir. Sir Red sings the blues. Shout out to you. Shout out to him. Definitely go and subscribe to his channel and join him for the New Year's party. Yeah, I got this frame thing, took it with me on the road, and trying to make it work out here. Trying to make it work. So, I decided that we should try and pull a rescue mission today and talk about this word leverage and talk about what we can actually confidently say about the types of leverage that we have, where the fulcrum is about cultivating leverage in a very practical, very simple, very measurable, very actionable way, not in the way in which cliches are typically talked about. The easier it is to pay homage, to pay homage to something verbally in the form of a cliche, right? You have cliches and bromides and little tropes, things that you can say to just pay respect, pay lip service to concepts and principles so that you can then forget about them. Yes, cliches are where great practical truths go to die. You can say the right words. You can say things like, do you know your leverage? Use leverage. Leverage is very important. Leverage other people's time, leverage other people's money, leverage this, leverage that. But if you bring it down to earth, and if it is that important, then, well, let's talk about it in a practical sense. Or let's bring it back down to brass tacks. Now, there is a reason for this. There is a impetus for this particular whimsical diatribe. I appeared what shall I say? I made an appearance on the O'Shea Duke Jackson podcast recently, and as part of the conversation that we had, we mentioned leverage. Leverage tangentially in passing, talking about having leverage as a result of having experience, being able to make decisions from a place of experience, being able to have certain options open while or at the same time when you also have experience to make better choices and so on and so forth. And then as a result, there was a comment. And let me see if I can share something. And apologies because with the Rode gear, with the one laptop, my Rode game is not anywhere near peak. So the reading of the chat and the sharing of the screen and the looking up of things and things like that, it's a little on the slow side. But we're taking it easy. We're being celebratory, aren't we? Yes, yes, yes. There was a comment with a question. A comment with a question that led me down this path of this leverage conversation. And bear with me while I attempt as I make feeble attempt after feeble attempt. Feeble attempt to share. So shout out, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, once again. Shout out to Black Curls and Nisa in the house. Always a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, as you come in. So the gentleman asked, well, he mentioned, just watched your video with O'Shea Duke Jackson. And I'm a 28-year-old. And he commiserates and he agrees with certain aspects of the late bloomer conversation that we had. And then paraphrasing now down below, he agrees with the fact that he feels like he has more leverage when making negotiations, to put it in simple terms. But what is it about experience that gives us leverage? Okay. So I said, well, let's break down leverage from the intuitive down to the more abstract. Okay. Leverage is about levers. All right. So let's go down to the mechanism, because it really is about a machine or a tool. Okay. It really is about a machine or a tool. So let's go back there and let's make this rescue mission about picking up from the graveyard of cliches this word called leverage. Pick it up, dust it up, and see that there are many things that we can gain so that we can use, because, use it or lose it is the proposition by which we have to operate. It is a cliche because it is true. It is a cliche word with which we make cliche sentences about things that are true, but cliches are an easy way to ignore truths. Cliches are an easy way to ignore truths. Right? So, seems like people are settling in. And I too am settling in. And welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, to my channel. My name is Ike, and over here we talk about being better, doing better. What are we doing today? We are unpacking, rescuing, opening the package of this word leverage, looking at it from a particular perspective, from the perspective of use it or lose it. What kinds of leverage can we cultivate, beginning from what the word actually means, and understanding, well, where's the fulcrum, which is that place around which the motion happens, but it is that place that does not move. The fulcrum is super important. All right. We talk about leverage in a social sense, but still we have to refer back to the mechanical analogy from which the concept comes, so that we can use this tool. We can rescue it from the trash heap of cliches.
because it's the end of 2020. And what else is there to do at the end of 2020 than rescue? Rescue gems from the trash heap of cliches, ladies and gentlemen. So that's what we're going to do. So we are in a celebratory mood. In the past few shows have been that way. Musings about musing, ladies and gentlemen. Exactly. Felicia says the thing about cliches is that we're used to them, and things that we're used to disappear. Let me get a one in the chat, by the way, just if we understand this idea of the fact that the easier it is for something to be praised verbally, the easier it is to be ignored in reality. You can pay lip service to it, right? Things that are right in front of you and that everybody takes as a common truth, as a truism, as a cliche, can be easily ignored. They actually fade out of our consciousness, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So, cliches are annoying and boring, but at the same time, they are a graveyard of very profound practical truths. The truths are so profound and so practical that everybody takes it for common sense, and then everybody proceeds to ignore it, though. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, when we look up the definition of leverage, because we're going to start from there, right? Because we're going to rescue a cliche. We're going to start from the boring meaning of the word and look at the mechanism so that we can build up the intuition. We're almost like it's like picking up a old weapon or old suit of armor. We're going to pick it up, we're going to dust it up, we're going to see if we can make some adjustments to it and put it on so we can use it, because it is very important. Everyone says it's important, becomes a cliche, and then becomes easy to ignore. Now, when we look up the definition of the word leverage, it uses the word levers in the definition. In other words, it's a circular thing. It says, well, let me go ahead and clumsily try to share the definition, because I might as well try and fail and learn while I have the chance. So if I wanted to share this definition over here, um, yeah, I shared it like that. But it says, okay, that leverage has to do with the exertion of force by means of a lever. So it's like, okay, what is leverage? And then it talks about the lever. Okay, so there is a circular thing going on there, which means that let's go below the words and just talk about the mechanism. Because if you have a skeleton, if you have bones, if you move around the world, then you are very, very well versed in what leverage is from an intuitive point of view. So let's go to the intuitive point of view. Let's talk about the the mechanism. Because trust me, it takes us all the way there. It takes us all the way there in the sense that if we understand the mechanism, we will begin to understand the answer to the question, where is the fulcrum? Where is that immovable point? What is the shape of the leverage that I have? Because the leverage mechanism is not very complicated, but there are a couple of shapes that it can take. In accordance with these shapes, they're given classes. They're called classes of levers. So let's talk about classes of levers, because the analogy translates into this domain of leverage, which we're going to talk about. And we will confine the domain to mention for the first time to the social sphere. In other words, things from all the way from one-on-one sales and persuasion and influencing, all the way to appeal to authority or reputation, and so on and so forth. So the kinds of ways in which we can influence each other within the realm of a system of social pressures, all the way from one-on-one sales, influencing, persuasion, all the way to authority, right? Through reputation, perhaps appeal to tradition. In other words, the pathos aspect and the ethos aspect of things. So that's the realm we're talking about. That's the realm in which we're discussing the use of leverage. And we're going down to the basics to understand the mechanism of leverage, because it actually gives us a very nice way of systematizing the whole problem of the leverage that we have, makes us understand how to cultivate the kinds of leverage that we need to cultivate. Yes, cultivate, because we know that the use it or lose it proposition is generally true for us living organisms. Everything about you is a use it or lose it proposition. If you understood more clearly, perhaps, a particularly important concept, principle, so important that it becomes a cliche, such as, for example, leverage, then you may find that there are aspects of it that are worthy of cultivation and use, even just because of the use it or lose it proposition, right? Even just for that, as a basic healthcare proposition. Yes, mental health, healthcare, um, upkeep. It's like saying, yes, use your cardiovascular system, use your system of attention. For example, in our series on meditation, which we will continue to make videos and have conversations on. So over here, we're talking about picking up from the trash heap of cliches a particular mechanism called leverage, which we know that we use in the social sphere, but let's dust it up, understand it, so that we can answer the question, what kind of leverage do we have? Where is the fulcrum? How do we cultivate more of this type? How do we work on gaining more of that type? And this whole question about the fact that you feel like you have more leverage as you get more experience. What is that about? What is it that you're developing that gives you that feeling? Shout out to the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to the chat. So let's do this. At this point, I shall try another share because so far they have been working. You gotta give me that. They have been working. Okay. So let me try to share something else here. Bam. I can see you guys. Okay, well, yeah, let's share this. Let's share this. Okay. Let's talk about classes of levers and then immediately, and sorry for having the microphone far away there. We're going to talk about classes of levers and understand the social analogies quite quickly and use that as a way of understanding the whole leverage landscape very easily and very quickly. Okay. Over here again, we talk about simple, measurable, actionable, right? So bear with me, but it's going somewhere. It's going to get to a place where it's, oh, simple, measurable, actionable, but you got to till the land and then dig the hole and put in the seed and water and it germinates. And sometimes these rescue missions from the trash heap of cliches can be daunting tasks. But why not? 2020 has been an interesting year. A nice way to end it is to pull a rescue mission like this. So let me try to talk about, let me make an attempt here to talk about classes. Classes of levers. Okay? How are they classified? They're classified based on where the fulcrum is relative to the effort and the load. So let's start with class one. All right. And I already drew class one. You already saw it. Okay. Class one is more like a seesaw. And the middle here is where the leverage is, or where the fulcrum is. And then you have the two forces on the end, the load and the effort. In which case, we'll just draw two people, in this case, standing quite dangerously, living on the edge. On the seesaw. So class one levers are levers where the fulcrum is in between the two forces, right? The forces are called the effort and the load. Obviously, the load is the thing that you're trying to move, and the effort is where you're. But let's consider this case, okay? This is the case where the fulcrum is in the middle. It's called a class one lever, okay? This is a class one lever. A crowbar is also a class one lever, okay? This is a nail going into a piece of wood, and this is a crowbar. Because this is the fulcrum. But let's talk about the seesaw first, and then we'll talk about the crowbar. But we're talking about a class of levers. And why are we talking about a class of levers? Because when we looked at the definition of the word leverage, we saw that it has to do with exerting a force through levers. And we're like, okay, we have to understand this levers thing. Let's go back and understand this levers thing, because we use the social analogy. And I say that if we pick up the mechanical reality, or the actual mechanism, that is, right, and we look at it, we will see direct social analogies and therefore be able to get actionable intelligence here. So in class one, think about this, okay? We're talking in the social realm. What will be a class one type of leverage situation, okay? This is a case of equivalent exchange, or at least the seesaw being the balanced class one type of lever, right? This is a case whereby I need to pump you up. I need to, let's say, for example, one simple class one seesaw equivalent exchange, obvious example is any kind of marketplace free exchange. Any free exchange within the marketplace where I give you value, you give me value. I'm a great logistics person within your supply chain and you're a good manufacturer. You do better, I do better, right? Or we are both alumni of some college, or we're friends and we trade favors. Okay. Let me get a one in the chat if we're getting an idea for how we make the analogy between class one levers, this lever where the fulcrum is in between the load and the effort, the two forces, right? What kind of leverage that is in the social sphere, okay? There is equivalent exchange. There is a need for me to give you that potential, for me to push down, give you that potential, that height, and then you use it. So this is typically called networking, which is another cliche, and then it goes off and dies and everybody ignores it. But let's not ignore it. Let's try to look at it with some degree of conscientiousness and understanding that there are gems to be mined here. So when you just call it networking and you just think, oh, well, you just network, you magically, it's a very passive thing. You magically go to these places and maybe you guys pass business cards around or share LinkedIn information or attend some other charity event together but how does one cultivate this reciprocal leverage? Because it is the most easily accessible level of leverage. I'll have to ask for another one in the chat if you understand why this reciprocal seesaw class one lever type of leverage is the one that has the lowest barrier to entry. Okay. It's a do for me, I do for you kind. It's almost the entry level to leverage. And as a result, it is easier to cultivate, or shall we say, it is more amenable to cultivate, to planting seeds, to actually taking a more active approach towards rather than just calling it networking. Shout out to Jared in the building. And Jared has been enwrenched in these hallowed grounds. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, understanding that class one, fulcrum in the middle, and the fulcrum could be the marketplace. The fulcrum is some hard object. Let's not even call it an object, and let's just go back to the picture of our seesaw so that we keep the intuition at hand. The intuition is a mechanical intuition. It is before words. In other words, we understand leverage. We have muscles, skeletons. We live in a physical environment. We understand leverage in a primal level. Let's go back to that primal level. Regroup, regrasp, collect our intuition about the classes of leverage, and then understand how to play the game with this particular thing that everybody says is very valuable and everybody talks about, and then it becomes a cliche and then everybody ignores, which is the sad reality of how great practical truths are. Great practical truths very quickly become boring and then ignored and then not practiced. And so I have decided to take on this daunting task, this brave task of going into the boring graveyard of cliches to unearth this leverage word. Oh, yes. So, class one. All right. Both parties are taking advantage of an already existing structure. The structure could be the marketplace. The structure could be a social media platform, for example, right? And you guys are both promoting each other using that social media platform, which will be the fulcrum. Equal, balanced loads on either side. I lift you up, and then you can lift me up. Relationships through time. Relationships with your clients, for example. What is your systematic way of keeping the seesaw moving? Especially, okay, it goes without saying that if you are in business at all, any kind of business, or any kind of a framework where you have to, shall we say, keep mutually beneficial relationships going. I mean, obviously, you have to keep in touch with your friends and so on and so forth. But with the seesaw, you have a lot of power in the give side. In other words, if you go around and you ask people what you can do for them, huge amount of power there. Another power you also have is to ask them for a favor, but this particular asking for a favor is of a particular kind. I talked about it in a video called Sometimes It Is Better to Receive Than to Give. In other words, where there are already certain parameters established, and I believe it was Benjamin Franklin that said, when you move into a new neighborhood, go across the street immediately, knock on your neighbor's door and ask him for sugar. Ask for something, in other words. And this is a situation where you guys already have many other social attributes in common. You guys live in the same neighborhood, understand the same language, or you guys go to the same conference, you're wearing the same boring suits, right? You guys are all in the same kind of class or something like that, or the same school, or you're in the office where you're the new guy. You have a lot of things in common already. One good way of endearing people to you and beginning this seesaw, mutually beneficial, class one leverage with the fulcrum in the middle, is to ask them for something. Hey, can I borrow a pen? Hey, neighbor, can I borrow your watering hose? Something that they can easily give and will kindly give, because people feel good when they can give you something. People feel useful. They feel like the big man on the block. I'm the big man in the classroom, and the newbie is asking me for some tips or for some pens or for some stationery or. So, point being, you have the power to ask for things, again, within certain circumstances. But you always have the power to offer help in many different ways. Think about a way in which you could help somebody and go and say, hey, I've thought about this particular task you are embarking upon. And here are some tips, or here are some things. And this is some experience I have. This is my Rolodex or something like that. Any way in which I can help, and perhaps in doing this, that, or the other, let me know. And you continue this class 1 leverage where is the barrier to entry is low because you're not using some huge fulcrum. I mean, some huge lever, which we'll talk about, which is more like the crowbar. And while we talk about the crowbar, let's go ahead and see if we can if we can practice our sharing skills one more time. All right. I'm feeling good about my sharing skills, and I'm risking it all. I'm saying, let's do this. I see. I see. We shall try it out like this. Perhaps. You know what? I will do this instead. As the saying goes, you build it while you fly it. We have a good time out here in the end of 2020. And I hope everybody is having a decent last week. I'll be out here streaming from the Los Angeles, holding it down in the Western Front, ladies and gentlemen. Holding it down in the Western Front. So, ladies and gentlemen, shout out to Jonathan in the house. And today it's Casual Wednesday. It's Casual Wednesday. Okay. And in Casual Wednesday, we get to practice our skills live. We get to go into the lab and be impromptu to test things out and take on brave tasks such as today, the rescuing of the cliche term leverage from the dustbin of cliches where great practical truths go to die. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ike. Welcome, one and all. I see good men in the chat. So we talked about class 1 levers. We talked about the fact that the fulcrum is in between the load and the effort. The first kind we chose to talk about is the seesaw, right? Seesaw, one person at one end, the other person at the other end, reciprocal, not a big barrier to entry. You give value for value, all right? This is something that you can cultivate in the sense that it behooves you, for example, at the end of the year, go ahead, find your valued business partners, your valued customers, and so on and so forth. The 80-20 rule, right? The 20% that actually brings the 80% of the value. Make sure that you send them something. Handwritten thank you note, a box of confectionery, chocolate, something like that, right? End of the year. Keep that going. Ask, what can I do for you? And also ask, can you help me? Depending on the circumstances. To keep that seesaw moving, there needs to be equivalent exchange in the seesaw kind of leverage, but both parties benefit. Both parties use an external fulcrum, such as the marketplace, as a way of mutually benefiting each other. All right. So go out there and multiply. Multiply the networks, the efforts, the pushing of the envelope in certain directions vis-a-vis the cultivation of this seesaw-like situation. And I know we're looking at a crowbar on the screen because a crowbar is also of the same class, but a crowbar doesn't have the equal ratios, right? A crowbar has a long end where you're going to put in the effort. You have a long lever, right? And then a short end where you're going to be pulling. And the fulcrum, again, will be the table in this case, or the piece of wood, that is. So this is the fulcrum right here. An important part of how levers are categorized. So in this first category, the fulcrum is always between the load and the effort. Okay, our effort is over here. E, F, F for effort. All right. And this kind is fairly simple, right? We had to say a word or two about the seesaw kind, which we'll also get back to in the terms of the overall practicality of leverage and understanding the kind of leverage that you have and where the fulcrum is and so on and so forth, so that you can just have a systematic approach to doing this important thing, right? Rather than just it being a cliche that people pay lip service to. And by people, I mean you and me. Because the easier it is to pay lip service and homage via verbal gesticulations to a concept or a principle, the easier it is to ignore it in reality and not be practical and pragmatic about it. So we are taking this brave journey to the underworld to talk about leverage. So in this case, basically, this is what we typically mean when we think of leverage. Or shall we say, me anyways, we think of the tire iron, the crowbar. Yes, it is in the class 1, but we generally don't think of the seesaw first. Okay. But this crowbar situation is a situation where you are using other people's time, other people's money. Pathos, for example, in other words, your particular reputation, right? Or certain traditions. In other words, this long bar here that you have, all right, this unevenness, all right. So this is a situation over here. The fulcrum could still be, again, the fulcrum is the domain in which things have to, the place where things do not move. In other words, the forces are going around, the movement is going around the focal point, which is the fulcrum. And the fulcrum is very important, and I keep mentioning it, but we'll get to the point about it when we get to the point about experience, which the heading of this video is. Yes, it says leverage from experience. And I mentioned that there was a comment about knowing that I feel like this person says, I feel like I have more leverage as I gain more experience and I get older, but I don't know why I feel like I have more leverage in all kinds of negotiations. But we will see when we will talk about the fulcrum in class 2 levers. Class 2 and class 3 levers are where we will talk about when you have to be the fulcrum and how to fortify your fulcrum and have your solidity and your place of balance and understanding when that is the lay of the land before you go into any particular negotiation or reciprocal human interaction, of which they all are. All social interactions can be viewed from the perspective of reciprocity and perhaps at some level transactional. But let's finish up with this crowbar and then we'll go into class 2 and we'll talk about the cultivation of your fulcrum when you have to be the fulcrum in a negotiation. But over here, this unevenness, which is the crowbar type of fulcrum, has to do with you using certain within the social space, because we're not talking about using money now. We're talking about people's time, people's tradition, people's reputation, your authority, you having a PhD, so on and so forth, gives you that long arm in any kind of relationship. Whereby there has to be some kind of an exchange. So this is the crowbar manifestation of the class 1 levers, ladies and gentlemen. So let's do this then. What is the class 2 and the class 3 therefore? Shout out to K Coaching in the house, said Brother Ike. How are you? I am doing very well. How are you? Okay. Today we're having Casual Wednesday and we're just cracking some particular nuts. This dry, dusty nut called leverage, trying to unearth it from its grave. From the grave of cliches, where brilliant and very pragmatic, useful principles go to die. And very, very true, Felicia. I mean, and, you have to sometimes just go back to, well, not sometimes. I believe in always going back to the intuition. That's what we did. We said there's a word. At a certain level of story, at a certain level of language, which is tropes, bromides, cliches, right? Things that are easily recognized with simple phrases that people can repeat. At that level of representation, okay, you can talk about things like leverage. But then you can take it down and be like, let me define the word leverage. And then you go there. And then when we try to define it, it said levers. It used a part of the word to define itself. So there is a deeper thing here, a mechanism, a machine, if you will, called leverage. something we're all very intimately familiar with because we are organisms out here in space-time with limbs and so on and so forth. So we understand simple mechanics, right? So we go down to the intuition and then we look at the different kinds of leverage so that we can gleam and remember, oh, there's the seesaw type of leverage. Maybe I need to, since that one has the lowest barrier to entry, cultivate that more and understand what it takes, and don't just bury it under the cliche of some other word such as networking or something like that. It's like, no, it is this particular shape of reciprocity, equivalent exchange, so on and so forth. You have the capacity to ask and also to offer help in order to keep that flow going. Things are about flow. And that's why cash flow is very important. Okay? Cash flow is more important than cash. And if the whole thing is about a pipe that flows, not so much of a tank. Am I preaching to somebody here when I say, because I went on a tangent there into cash flow in the sense of keeping a flow going. And I went into keeping a flow going because we're talking about this seesaw, reciprocal exchange kind of leverage. Okay. It could be a market kind of transaction. It could be trading favors amongst friends, value for value. All right. Indeed. Indeed. Value for value. And you need to understand that attention is also leverage, by the way. The person that can attract the most attention tends to have another kind of leverage, social leverage, again, still within this simple sphere. The simple sphere, ladies and gentlemen. So let me go back and clumsily, famously go to our screen share. And let's talk about the second class of levers. Okay. And we'll all tie it up back in a nice little bow because really we're trying to make it clear and confidently be able to state what class of leverage we have in a particular situation, where the fulcrum is. All right. So that when we step into any particular situation, we understand the areas that we need to fortify, the areas where we're not so strong. And then also, we've already seen that there's this seesaw type of class of leverage that we need to cultivate all the time, right? In order to play the leverage game. So we're going to look at class 2 and class 3. All right. We said that class 1, and I will just draw it again. Class 1 has the fulcrum in the middle. Okay. You have a load, you have an effort, and you have the fulcrum, or you have a seesaw type of situation, or a crowbar type of a situation, right? That's class 1. Well, what about class 2 and class 3? Well, in those classes, which I like to exemplify with a fishing rod, because the classes are defined by where the fulcrum is and where the load is. Okay, in those classes, all right, you have the load over here, all right, and a fish, okay? And then you have the fulcrum down here, and then you have the effort in the middle, okay? Your hand, all right? So the fulcrum is interrupted by, or shall I say, there's a load and there's a fulcrum, and in between you have the effort, right? So let's see if we can recover some kind of a drawing. Maybe the effort, maybe the fulcrum, you put it on your knee, and then you have your hand here. Let me see if I can pull out a decent drawing here. Yeah, look at that. Stand right there, got that knee right there. Bada boom, bada bing. Hey. And you have a fishing hat on. Yeah, you have a fishing hat on, it's good times out here. So in this scenario, the fulcrum is right here. Okay. And this is where the part where you need to be the fulcrum, in other words, where you need to be the one that is fortified in order to exercise leverage, that part is 100% key. You need to understand that. Other things we've described, the fulcrum was, let's say, in the marketplace, some kind of rules of the game in terms of equivalent exchange, so on and so on and so on. In this case, the fulcrum is on your knee or wherever you put the fishing rod, and you have the effort over here, then you have the load over there. So this is another class. And the third class, if you can imagine, is if you have your hand over here and you have a nut cracker. Okay. And since we're feeling very bold, okay, we're feeling very bold and very adventurous. So the nutcracker, you have the fulcrum at the end, okay, you have the load in the middle, right? And then you have the effort over here. So you got that effort, you got the load in the middle, and then you have the fulcrum at the end, okay? So these other two classes of levers. Well, let's talk about, before we go cracking nuts, let's talk about the fishing rod. Class 2, fulcrum, effort, load. Not your knee, not your knee, Jonathan says. So, what can we say about class 2? What do we know about class 2? There is something about class 2 leverage which we need to stop and talk about. Yes, we have to have a serious conversation about class 2 leverage. Okay. This is a situation where, and I think we can all understand it, where you are literally on the negotiating table and you have to hold firm to your position. You have to get the most optimal agreement, outcome for yourself. A position where things such as willpower come into play. A position where phrases such as willingness to walk away come into play. We understand what I mean now. The fulcrum is on you. You have to be that immovable part. You have to be the fulcrum, class 2 lever. You have to be the immovable part. So Willingness to walk away can come from different sides, from different sources. But willingness to walk away is what we're going to call the attribute that can form a nice fulcrum for your negotiation skills. Right? Because we're out here to salvage, we're out here to save this word leverage out from the dustbin, the trash heap of cliches, bring it out, polish it, be able to talk confidently about exactly what it is and how we practically utilize it, and not just pay lip service and talk a good game. Because all that talk does not really lead to the highest heights that you can possibly attain. Can I hear an amen? Ladies and gentlemen, how are everyone? Oh, yeah. Welcome, Richard Dixon, sorry. Richard Dixon in the house. Optimization, says Jonathan. 100%. 100%. Optimization is an axiom. There is no perfect solution. There are only trade-offs. Therefore, there's only optimization. However, coming from a position of strength, which is that fulcrum in a class 2 type of leverage situation, you're trying to reel in the fish. You have to be the fulcrum, the immovable part. You need to be able to train for that particular jujitsu battle. Correct? And we need another sparkling water opened. And we got another sparkling water opened. Beer or cream soda, that's funny. I always rock with the sparkling water. It's always sparkling water all day. And today we're doing the Topo Chico brand. Holding it down. Y'all should sponsor me. Topo Chico. And Red sings the blues, drinks those flavored ice waters. Shout out to Michael Graham in the house. And shout out to everybody in the house holding it down as we traverse this landscape, practically picking up practical, simple, measurable, actionable, intuitive tools about the leverage landscape in a meandering, free-flowing, relaxed New Year's vibe kind of way. Why out here in the West Coast? Strawberry kiwi. Ladies and gentlemen, Finding solidity, therefore, becomes key in this class 2 kind of a leverage situation where you have to be the fulcrum. You are like the person with the fishing rod on the hip or the knee, or the hip, and reeling it in. Okay? The fulcrum, and then the effort, and then the load at the end. You have to understand how to fortify your fulcrum. And that's very basic. It's through practice. And this has to do with more on the land of one-on-one negotiation, one-on-one influence, selling, persuasion. Because we define that this is the landscape we're going to be talking in, all the way from one-on-one influence and selling, all the way through to appeals to tradition, reputation, pathos, ethos, all kinds of social incentives, and so on. The marketplace even included as a structure, as a chessboard, as a set of rules where cooperation and competition takes place. But understanding this particular being the fulcrum means understanding mastery of subjective consciousness. Again, obviously, yes, Ike, you were going to go there, weren't you? Here you go again, Ike, with the subjective consciousness talk. Michael Graham says, see you in LA. How am I loving it? Especially with the lockdown. So, lived in Southern California for at least 16 years. So I kind of consider it home turf, from San Diego to LA, down even to the Inland Empire. So I can hang and I can deal in LA and with LA in all kinds of circumstances. Plus, I'm a bit of a wherever you go, there you are kind of guy. Just another way of saying I'm an introvert. And as long as I got my situation situated, I'm having a blast. But yes, the lockdown does suck because I was going to go out to dinner with some friends. And then I realized, oh no, not even indoor or outdoor eating, blah, blah, blah. But we are doing fine. We're doing fine. We still got our Topo Chico's sparkling water. We still got our lattes. We still have a great view, and we have a great mission to unearth, to rescue out of the grave of cliches this term called leverage, ladies and gentlemen. $100%. So, Lord Commander, good question. Let me give a quick overview because we're in the middle of this particular meandering musing about leverage. The broad overview is understanding what leverage is from the mechanical, intuitive point of view. Understanding the classes of leverage will help us to pick up some basic tools about what kind of leverage we have in different situations, where the fulcrum is, where we need to place emphasis, and where we have certain weaknesses. We've already seen that there is in the class 1 leverage or class 1 levers a seesaw type of a situation where, a seesaw situation where there is equivalent exchange, value for value, favors being traded, and that we have a lot of power to keep that kind of leverage game going. We have a great responsibility to keep those going. That's the lowest barrier of entry leverage type of a situation. We talked about the crowbar a little bit as well. Okay. Now we're moving into class 2, where you have to be the fulcrum. Yes, okay, you have to have the fulcrum. You have to be the one that is fortified. And as someone mentioned in the chat, it's almost like going in and defending a position, right? You're having a debate, that kind of a thing. But that needs to happen a lot of times, whether it be for negotiating treaties, or trying to bring down the value of a house down, the property, negotiating property taxes with the state of Washington, or trying to buy housing in Austin, Texas, because you think of the migration patterns, and then you'll be able to rent it out and so on. Those kinds of commercial negotiations and all kinds of negotiations tend to require you to have a fulcrum, a place where there is some solidity in yourself, in your being, in your house, if you will. And how do we actively cultivate those? What are the sources of those? One way to summarize is the ability to walk away. And how do you cultivate the ability to walk away? Because it gives you strength and leverage in this class 2 leverage type of a situation. So this is the kind of meandering that we're doing. And let me get a 1, Mr. Lord Commander, if I did a decent job of trying to answer your question. A halfway decent job of trying to answer your question, sir. So let me mention again that the part of the impetus of doing this was because a gentleman asked, how come I feel like I have more leverage with the more experience I get? The older I become, the more experience I have. Why do I just feel that I have more leverage? Obviously, this person is not talking about the obvious leverage, like, let's say, other people's money, other people's time, or your money and your time. But talking about something whereby you need to be the fulcrum and you need to be the place that is immovable in this particular kind of a negotiation. Class 2 type levers, okay? And there are certain things that you gain from experience, but obviously you should try to understand and exercise, with the whole use it or lose it proposition being true. There are certain things you gain from experience which help you in this particular regard, which help you in being able to have that solid place. Now, one of them is, with experience, you're able to gain patience because you've seen different cycles. This helps with your ability to walk away. Your ability to walk away, again, is how we're kind of defining that solid ground. And there are many ways of getting that ability to walk away. One of the obvious ones is about having options, right? When you have options, you have the ability to walk away. Also, something that you gain from experience is having seen cycles come and go. Therefore, you're not desperate. You have more patience. You have a more long view. This also gives you an ability to walk away. Okay. It could almost be put as a pain tolerance thing. You have tolerance for pain. This tends to come with experience. This gives you the ability to walk away also. And then there is just the pure recognition of value. You understand that this is the value, either that you're willing to give or willing to get. And your pure understanding and recognition of value makes it such that you're willing to walk away in a situation that you consider to be suboptimal. The willingness to walk away in class 2 leverage situations is something that you can always work on because it is literally you. You are the fulcrum. You are the immovable spot. It is the fishing rod situation. Ladies and gentlemen, shout out to Dr. Thunder in the house. Yes, experience is leverage, it turns out to be. Okay? And whenever one finds out simple statements such as that, I think that we should find a way of gaming it. That is my immediate thought is by gaming, I mean, how do we formally practice it? How do we increase that capacity? How do we juice that one? Yes. So, because again, one of my basic principles is just follow, use it, or lose it. Okay. If you follow the use it or lose it principle, A, you will not be wrong often. Okay. And B, there's almost only upside. You will not be wrong often because there's so many representations of the use it or lose it principle, whether it be your muscles or your bones or your immune system or the focusing of your eyesight or your psyche or stuff like, not being babied so much and put in safe spaces because this will make you ineffective. In other words, there's so much of this manifestation of use it or lose it all through the ecosystem and all through individual biological systems and also economies even and many complex systems that if you look at things with the use it or lose it proposition, you will rarely be wrong. And if you say, hey, I need to be able to use this kind of leverage thing, otherwise I'll be losing it. What are the kinds of leverage I need to be cultivating out there? And we talked about the seesaw one, the simple one, equal, equivalent exchange. You do for me, I do for you. I have to give you that boost on the seesaw so that you go up so that you can give me the boost. That kind of a thing. Okay. And then we talked about the crowbar as well. But now we're talking about class 2 kind of leverage where you have to be the immovable position or in the immovable position where the fulcrum is you, the fulcrum is on you. And there are things that experience teaches you. But hey, you can always practice them and therefore get better because leverage negotiation is super, super key, ladies and gentlemen, because we are social animals and this is all a social game and life is about social games and people. All right. Yes, indeed. Dr. Thunder in the house. Let me see if I can share the comment. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for showing up over here. I am your host. If you are new to this channel, please make sure to subscribe. Then hit the bell button and all. Like, subscribe, bell button, and all. LSBA. The LSBA algorithm. Like, subscribe, bell button, all. Shout out to everyone in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. So, I started out this by saying that it is a rescue mission and unearthing from the burial grounds. Okay? Because cliches is where great practical ideas go to die, practical concepts go to die. They're so practical and so powerful that they become cliches and then they disappear in plain sight. Like everything else that becomes background It just becomes noise, background noise, white space. It disappears. You ignore it. There is a treasure trove of gems to be unearthed from cliches. And we picked leverage today. We picked leverage, ladies and gentlemen. And we went down to the intuition of it, went to the mechanism, because we tried to define the word and the word referred to a lever. We went back to the lever. We talked about the classes of levers, and we talked about how this is a direct relationship to the kinds of leverage that we have in the social space as social mammals doing social transactions. And we say, hey, let's at least be able to categorize. Do we have the class 1 leverage? Is it a seesaw situation? How am I handling my seesaws? For example, could be a question that you're asking, right? How am I handling my seesaws? I look at my business. Am I sending gifts to my clients? Or am I sending gifts to potential clients? Am I receiving things? Should I be asking for stuff and giving stuff? In other words, the circulation, the flow, which was a tangent that I went on earlier. Things are about flow. By that I mean potential. Let's say either gravitational potential, electromagnetic potential. There needs to be the potential, positive charge, positive pole, negative pole, charge flow for positive, negative, that kind of a thing. A circuit, a flow. Without a flow, for example, with water, let's say, it becomes what? What happens? It becomes septic. Septic is not great, at least for us that like oxygen, the the non-septic creatures out there. So basically, things are about the flow. You want to think about cash as a pipe flowing, not a tank. That's why cash flow is king, not cash is king. Same thing with giving, getting, trading all kinds of favors or having social cachet, so on and so forth. It's about the flow. The flow is how you generate the energy. You want to open up your pipe and have a big flow. It's not about having a tank. Tanks are not useful. It's about having a flow. Ladies and gentlemen, while I say some more cliches, things that you guys already all know, give me a second here while I try to read the chat. Mm. 100%. Michael Graham, constant state of progress. Jonathan in the house. Talking about thinking of leverage like a mathematical model where the domain equal to the set of parameters available to me to control. And then rage is the set of possible practical, or should I say all practical outcomes, including the desired ones. Okay? Understanding the landscape and understanding the seesaw, for example, knowing that you have seesaws out there that you got to go activate. You got to boost people up so they can boost you up. All right? That's one way of getting this mechanism going, getting things moving, getting things flowing. Okay? You don't want just balance. You want to move that seesaw, right? And also, you want to be able to master your self, your state, know where your solidity lies, and be able to practice in a very practical sense. Practice and get used to the discomfort of when the fulcrum is on you, when you have to hold a solid ground. It will appear to you just like everything else appears to you, like anger or shame or guilt or whatever. It appears to you in your body and in your mind, right? So the more you practice it, the more you role play this particular aspect, okay? Because as I said, there are many ways of getting it through experience. Okay, you can get it from having more patience, from having seen more cycles go through. It being the ability to walk away, which is the way of defining that fulcrum, inner strength of a negotiator, right? We said that there are ways of getting it through experience, and we just mentioned a couple of them. But also, there is a way that you can actively practice through literal practice, right? Literally role playing, literally getting yourself into uncomfortable situations so that you get used to the feeling of being uncomfortable. Because the fulcrum, the solidity, is formed by you being used to and you not taking action as a result of whatever disturbance comes your way when you have to hold ground. What does it feel like? Do you feel it in your chest? Is it in your stomach? Is there a ringing in your ear? Do you get hot under the collar? Maybe it's all at once. Get used to that. Look at that as the battlefield. Look at that as the battlefield, the arena, the place where the work needs to be done. And as we approach the latter third of this conversation, feel free to join in and ask as I wrap this neatly and masterfully in a nice little bow. Indeed. Use it or lose it. Also, use it so you know how far it can go. Just like my man Jared just said, push to the breaking point so you know. It is not a question of judgment as to whether you are actually implementing this or not. It is a question of knowledge in the sense that this is simple and practical, intuitive, actionable, measurable, and simple, right? You simply practice this kind of stuff. You role play it or you do it through your imagination or whatever, whether it be a physical capacity or a mental capacity, so on and so forth. The same rules apply. You want leverage, you want to be a strong fulcrum for leverage of this particular kind, class 2 levers we're talking about, then you simply have to find that solid ground. And that there are ways to do that. Just like someone can tell you, well, there are ways to get nice solid legs, no matter how much you hate leg day, you cannot complain that there are no leg exercises. Yes, sir, Dr. Thunder. Dr. Thunder and his ability to walk away. Your ability to walk away. He said tomorrow is leg day. Well, salute to you, sir. Salute to leg day. Salute to leg day, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, there he is.
Guess who's back? How's it going?
Back. It's Lion Legal, our resident rascal.
The resident mascot, indeed.
Okay.
Yes.
There you go. How's it going
Well,
today, sir?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, I think I just messed up my little ear thing, but keep talking and let me while I fix my audio.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I think that experience is good. Experience is good, but the issue with that is that if you get it at the wrong time, you could miss opportunities. So the best thing to do is rather than having to leverage your experience, you should leverage your understanding and knowledge gained from looking at other people and seeing what their experiences are. An example can be in boxing. During the Muhammad Ali era, Don King was there. Don King would stage a lot of fights, and fighters would say, this guy is incredibly dynamic. He's able to put on a big show. This is the guy to go to. After Tyson interacted with him, Tyson lost millions of dollars. His life was in complete disarray. And then it became public that Don King is actually a very bad guy. Most people don't know that he had a lot of issues with the law, and he actually ended up killing 2 people. Yeah, Don King was someone who was an incredibly controversial character.
Mm-hmm.
After that, other boxers were not prepared to get involved with him at all. They ensured that they went to other promoters. They sued him to a large extent. Almost every single boxer that came into contact with him took him to court. So it shows that if a person had to rely on their experience, they would have already lost a lot being in a contract with him. They would have lost millions of dollars, lost time in their boxing career, and could have actually ended their career by being held down in a contract with him. So it's a lot better to look at other people's experiences, leverage from that experience. And the best way to actually see what experience others have is not a superficial understanding, but to read biographies of successful people and the trials and tribulations they had to go through. Read about your industry. Read about a particular business that you would like to go into, because at that point you are able to avoid a lot of mistakes which people make.
All right, so I 100% agree with you there, and the whole thing about experience for me was to elucidate the things that naturally get better with experience, and they have to do again with that internal fortification, which is not about external knowledge whatsoever. It's more about a negotiating thing rather than the leveraging of knowledge. So in elucidating that and saying that it is about you finding that fulcrum, that basic place, the immovable place, we can describe it as your willingness to walk away. How do you get it? You can get it via options. You can get it via understanding quality, get it via patience, a tolerance for pain, blah, 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 so on and so forth. But definitely the smartest way is to learn from other people's experience in terms of when it comes to leveraging information out there. And as you said, reading, not just superficial knowledge, right? And as I've been kind of playing around with this whole time, superficial knowledge can become, or cliches become superficial knowledge. They hide in plain sight. We don't learn anything. We don't practice them because it's just something that everybody says. All the MBAs in the room talking about synergy and leveraging and this and that. And it's just like, what is anybody really talking about, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, just to actually pick up on that comment that you made. Have you heard of a guy called Simon Sinek? Simon Sinek or whatever the last name is, Sinek?
No, I have not.
Okay, because he does exactly what you just commented on, which is he likes to gain a lot of superficial knowledge and then pretend like he's an expert. So he'll gain knowledge about psychology and say, for like a young kid, a millennial, they're all wrapped up into their phones, and phones cause the neocortex to be involved in, the feedback that they get from the dopamine. And People like that are just the worst of the worst because they completely misdirect a lot of individuals. They fall into the herd mentality, the people that actually like to follow him. And those are the guys that you have to avoid. That's why by getting true knowledge, true insight, and studying anything you would like to go in. Just to make a quick point, for example, if you're going to invest in the stock market, you can have people tell you on TV, invest in this stock, and think, okay, they've got the knowledge, let me do it, and then you lose everything. If you had actually taken the time to study the different strategies involved, how to value companies, even if you lost, you would understand the risk that you took. That's why it's always important to get as much information as you can within reason.
I 100% agree. And the half-truths, and you were talking about, the brain and the effects and the loop, and maybe
and the neocortex.
Maybe they'll mention the pineal gland, even if they want to take it a little too far.
He did actually mention that.
Yes.
The guy is horrible, man. I can't stand him.
Well, you know what? Yeah, let me cycle through you guys here, and I will. If you want to hop back on, just put it in the private chat. But let me cycle through here. And before I let the next guest in, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Just a quick reminder, all right? What kind of leverage do you have, and where is the fulcrum, okay? What kind of leverage do you have? Where is the fulcrum? What's the shape of the leverage, all right? Is it a class 1 leverage or class 2 leverage? Go ahead and keep those seesaws going, okay? Those class 1 leverage, equal exchange, you do for me, I do for you, the trading of favors, the asking people what you can do for them, what is typically called just, networking. But networking is so passive and lacks so much understanding of the simple seesaw mechanism that needs to be sustained to keep the flow going, right? So that is one key aspect, but then there are other aspects which we're in now, and we're talking about the fulcrum that is in you and how you get that, how you can work on that, how you can practice that. And we have a guest in the building. How's it going, sir? Can you say something?
Is it me?
I think it is you.
Okay.
It's you.
Awesome. Hey, Ike. This is a great conversation again. I'm ready. I'm loving you should do this more often. So, I have a couple things I wanted to. Well, there's one thing I wanted to ask you. Are you there? Hello? Oh, you disappeared.
I am here. Yeah, okay. I am here. I was just my phone was ringing, so I muted myself. Go ahead.
Okay. So okay, I see Lion Legal is still on my case. Awesome. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Ike, is and I think I mentioned this earlier in the chat. How do you actually think about the optimization versus leverage problem that I mentioned, right? So when I mentioned, let me clarify what I mean by that, right? So in a lot of cases, you may have multiple points, you may have multiple types of leverage, right? Where and you have to decide essentially, what am I optimizing for, right? It's kind of like, if you think of I don't know, like gearing in a manual transmission, right? Like you essentially have, those are essentially spinning levers, right? And so, do you want more torque or do you want more speed, right? And in terms of negotiation, you could look at that as you might have a business and you want to, let's say you want to raise investment for the business. It might be better, let's say, if you spend a year bootstrapping it, spending your time and your sweat equity and everything, getting it off the ground, because at that point you have more leverage to basically provide less equity, right, for the funding that you want. Whereas if you go in very early with very little to prove, the investor is going to want more, right? And so you might end up with similar outcomes in terms of success, but which one makes you more successful depending on the outcome that you want, right? So I feel like for me, a lot of times when I think about leverage, that's the thing that I'm constantly thinking about more so than the types of leverage I have is what exactly am I optimizing for here? Like, what exactly am I optimizing for? Whether it's a relationship, whether it's like a certain type of business relationship that I want to develop with somebody, and I feel like a lot of times I have to think about it, very long term to figure out, is this something that like a year down the line, where do I want to be? And and that's why, again, that's why it helps me to think about it the way I mentioned in the chat in terms of like optimization or like a model, because you have to essentially consider, you're essentially controlling all the inputs and saying, okay, here's all the outcomes, and some of the outcomes may not be what you desire, right? But here are the ones that I desire, or here's the one that I desire, and how do I actually get there? And a lot of times you could be wrong, right? Your approach could be wrong, and you might use the wrong leverage, or you might not even have the leverage you think you have. So am I making sense?
Yes, you are. And to the degree to which you're trying to formalize and systematize any of this, then we are in the same ballpark, right? Vis-a-vis saying, okay, well, let's take this thing and let's kind of look at it in a practical sense. Now, what you are doing is, you're complicating the landscape vis-a-vis goals, right? What are the stated goals? What is the hierarchy of goals? What am I trying to achieve? You right? And I need a hierarchy because I'm going to need to optimize, rob Peter, pay Paul, blah, 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 that kind of stuff, right? So, yeah, I was looking at your comments and your mathematical domain and range model there, and it does make sense, right? It does make sense. The whole point, though, of this is to actually do things that is to actually take action, right? Do something about rather than talk about, because the easier it is for something to be talked about such that it becomes a cliche, a triviality, a bromide, a trope, then it is easier to ignore it. It hides in plain sight. No one actually practices it because it is easy to pay it lip service and so on and so forth, right? But if you're thinking about leverage at all in terms of when you go into a situation that you're defining goals, you're already one step ahead of the game, right? Defining goals and then seeing how it may be optimized, and then seeing what kind of leverage you may have. And then we will all have different places in which we need to work on, right? And no, you and Lion Legal are not going to get the chance to complete your
I like, for the record, I don't have beef with him. I think he has beef with me, but
oh no, it's beef. I heard in the streets that it's a straight, it's on site. I'm playing, gotta have some fun with it, no?
And one more thing I wanted to kind of bring up, like, is in regards to the experience, right? Like, don't you think that, so how do I say it? So for example, like, let's say you have, again, we could take business or tech as an example here. So let's say you've attempted, let's say, at starting a small business, right? And you've attempted 2-3 times before and you failed, right? Some people will see that as maybe a signal that they might be a bad businessman, right? They might see that as a signal that they're not cut out for this. Whereas there are other people who who now will go the 4th time and attempt, and then that will be very successful, right? And so at that point, and on the flip side, right, you have, again, we could take tech as an example. You have entrepreneurs who, like, they will start company after company, and it's much easier for them the more companies they start, because they have more experience and people are more willing to invest in them, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you think about those different, like, in terms of, like, if you were, and maybe I'm just thinking about this in a manner that's too complicated, but like, if you were to have to formalize this for yourself in terms of how you decide, like, sometimes people don't know when to quit, right? Like, you don't know when to quit. Like, sometimes maybe you should actually quit, right? And so, like, how do you decide when, how how do you formalize this? Is what I'm saying. And maybe you shouldn't formalize it. Maybe you shouldn't formalize it. But
yeah,
I'm trying to
maybe you should, maybe you can't. But there is, as you mentioned, right, quite clearly. And let me put you in the back and cycle through here while I respond to you, if you don't mind. So how do you how do you systematize it? Okay. What you mentioned about a particular individual that's able to create a company after company after company after company tells us something. It is a data point, even though we cannot do a broad stroke experiment on this. It is a data point that suggests that it is not luck, or it is not, obviously these things are overdetermined in the sense that they have many parameters that affect them. But what are the dominant parameters here? That luck is perhaps not so important, for example, right? So, and I think that is key to the knowing when to quit thing, because if you know that luck is not the key thing, then you know that having a customer, in other words, having real life feedback, whether you're going through some kind of intellectual thing, whether it be an idea that you're trying to work on, right, and you're trying to figure out, or it be some product. Okay, so having early customers, in other words, finding good product market fit in the very beginning is key. And don't keep banging your head or pivot, therefore, based on what that immediately tells you. Facebook, for example, started, as a group of friends, Harvard campus, and then moved to other universities, and then all of a sudden, all over the world. Things have to work that way. You gotta, in other words, how do you know when to quit? You need to have skin in the game. Skin in the game means open feedback from the marketplace, from the arena of ideas, if you will, right? So never being insulated, okay, while just going on this maniacal, one-eyed pursuit, okay? Having to have a customer, having to have a boss, if you will, having to find product market fit for the idea, for the product, or whatever it may be for the concept, right? Learning from real life, getting skin in the game. That is the way in which it is done. And I think that is the way those people who do it serially, time and time again, these are the things that they practice, right? So that'll be my comment to that. But let me see here. Mr. Lion Legal, did you have anything else to add?
Oh, no. I was just going to add, during the last conversation, my name was brought up, that obviously there is no acrimony. There's no, Schadenfreude or disagreements.
No acrimony. I like it. We're in good spirits. Good times. That's excellent.
Absolutely. Great show, by the way. Great show. Keep up the good work.
Excellent. And you guys.
Yes. And I also saw that the views are going up, man. Damn, crazy. It's almost 500, 1,000 views every video. So that's a good thing. Yeah, man. Keep up the good work.
500 to 1,000 is good, definitely, and thank you very much. So
you don't keep track.
No. I'm not one of those people who say I don't keep track. No, I do. Okay. I do. Pay attention to the right things. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta, otherwise you're not learning, right? So yeah, I do pay attention to I have a routine with certain things that I always check every morning, right? But I need to make a video about that anyways. But what I was going to mention is that I'm changing and doing things, growing things, learning the whole, let's say, thumbnail game, and right now not having systematize a whole lot of stuff yet. So in terms of thumbnails for the videos and getting click, just we're putting the curtain down here a little bit, going behind the scenes. So thumbnails are a big part of whether people click or not on your video, and getting a good thumbnail game going there's some trial and error stuff involved, and there's some me not even being in the point where I even thought about thumbnails being involved. But so, and also now with the kind of what I'm doing lately, these past 3 streams, quite abstract, just going free flow. Okay. That's another trial to kind of see how things happen in that regard and how things react in that regard. But overall, it's fun. And yeah, thank you very much for noticing and complimenting.
Absolutely. Also, in the future, do you think that you'll be talking about more topical issues as far as the Black community are concerned, or just about the current self-improvement like stream that you have been on lately?
So when you say current issues, did you give an example? Could you repeat the example?
Yeah, like for example, if there's a topical issue such as if a law has, for example, the Supreme Court dealt with affirmative action as far as it relates to black people, and then criminal justice reform and things of that sort. Are those the kind of things which you would intend to? I don't know.
Yeah. So it is as you may have noticed. So let's say, for example, within the book review laboratory, that what Ike reads lab, if you will, which is just a way of testing out a kind of a mode of presentation. You will know that definitely political philosophy is one of my interests, right? So using particular current events as a foil for having conversations of all kinds is definitely it's part of it's in the cards, if you will, right? So that's a yes to the question. That yes, that is part of the deal.
Who is the best author that you've read in that particular genre, in the political commentary genre?
Oh my God. Oh man. If
Simon Sinek.
No, I would have to say, okay, because I like philosophical content, right? So there's an author called Alan Bloom.
Okay.
And he wrote a book called The Closing of the American Mind. And he is dead now, but it was a very straight to the point academic book. It didn't have any pretensions and so on and so forth. It stated ideas quite upfrontly and forwardly, but it was also a bestseller, which was kind of a rare thing, which is still kind of a rare thing, right? But The Closing of the American Mind is his breakdown on how certain kinds of relativism, okay, and certain kinds of focus on, let's say, self-esteem and personality versus, let's say, truth and tradition, maybe, right, is causing a breakdown, especially in American campuses. He was able to forecast a lot of the stuff that we kind of saw play out, right? So he was writing from back then, looking down the pipe, saying these are the things that are going to happen. Okay, and we've seen many of these things play out and come out of the universities and infiltrate the larger society. So Alan Bloom, The Closing of the American Mind, great book that gives a kind of broad overview of the socio-political landscape, and then asks the question about, like, well, what shall the nourishment of the soul be in this particular kind of a framework, right? With what do we nourish our souls? So that'd be my answer.
That sounds like a good book. Was he able to see that the campuses now, university campuses would shy away from debate and go towards
100%.
Trying to create a safe space for students?
So this is a dense and solid book, and I don't want to, and perhaps I'll do a review on it. Maybe I'll do.
Okay, right.
And I don't want to kind of give it short shrift, but basically he saw, as part of the whole critique of personality, getting along, relativism, he saw all that certain kinds of wrongs are going to be wronger than other kinds of wrongs. And then there will be things that will be forbidden and that kind of a thing, all in the interest of a democratic personality, self-esteem, and the presupposition of relativism of a certain kind, right? Now that sounds quite simplistic, but it's way more well developed than I just described. So he was able to see all that. Yes.
Well, I think that you described it quite well. And, the great thing about America is the fact that it has a constitution which is developed so well that it's kept the country together up until now. One of the founding principles of the Constitution is that people have the right to free speech. It seems as if university campuses are moving away from that idea. And I agree with the idea that people can't simply say anything in the private context. If you go to a company, you cannot make an outlandish statement, because if you do, the company has the right to fire you if people feel uncomfortable. However, you have an issue where the law says one thing: you have the right to free speech in the Constitution, but yet a lot of these government-funded institutions state that's not the case. That's not true. There will not be debate. There will not be discourse on controversial issues. Now, I'm a person that is not exactly geared towards controversial issues, etc. But if you want to improve the intellect of people coming into these schools, if you want to ensure that they're intelligent people, they know how to debate, they know how to have discourse on complex topics that arise, you have to at least allow opposing views to be actually presented, so that by the time students leave, they understand if they agree, if they disagree with you, their main objective is not to get you fired, is not to get you embarrassed in the newspapers, but they can actually reason and try and persuade people who have different views than they do. But
so
the way that things seem,
it's interesting when now that you mentioned that, one of the through lines that is drawn in this book that I mentioned, The Closing of the American Mind, is it shows certain inevitabilities given the broad tradition. In other words, it doesn't just look at America and the schools in the 1960s, and says, well, what happened, and that kind of a thing. No, it looks back at the whole intellectual patrimony, if you will, and see the direction that things were going to inevitably lead. Meaning, and then I want to have I'll cycle through here again and have a reaction to something that you said about this kind of, how does one treat the idea of sacred cows, things you cannot discuss openly, so on and so forth, right? But the idea that one of the main powerful ideas that this book puts through is showing how the moment that the intellectual game went into the political landscape, then it was almost inevitable that these two will begin to corrupt each other in a way that'll be decadent not decadent necessarily, but detrimental to the culture in general. In other words, when philosophy, when science and so on and so forth started speculating on or dealing with or getting into the political order, right? In other words, it's almost like when the church, when the princes and the clergy fell, okay? In other words, when philosophy got into politics more fully, at least modern type of philosophy, that it was almost inevitable that politics will start to dirty up philosophy. In other words, that the political landscape, the particular thoughts of the day of what vis-a-vis what is politically correct, is going to infect academia, right?
Right.
That it was almost a bitter pill that had to be swallowed, because, in other words, you can always go too far. The pendulum swung in order to kind of, let's dethrone Mr. Prince and Mr. Clergy and create space for science. But when politics still is a domain that needs to be respected and that has its own particular needs, which, by the way, are not necessarily can be given to you by science and so on and so forth. But not to go too far afield there, I wanted to just mention that, and then let me Let me cycle through here and ask Mr. Jonathan. Are you still there?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
What do you think about the idea of the sacred cows, things that cannot be discussed, political correctness in the workplace, for example? We mentioned, you heard Lion Legal talk about that stuff. And it also brings to mind the book that I was explaining about and so on and so forth. And I wanted to kind of see from your perspective, because you work in tech and so on and so forth, what are your thoughts on that? And I also know that you mentioned that your previous SJW adventures, right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely have thoughts on this. So I can say one thing I can definitely say is, even when I was, let's say, a social justice warrior, that is one aspect that I just could never get along with. And in fact, I feel like that's one of the things that actually pushed me further and further away from a lot of my former friends, right? Because for example, one thing that never made sense to me is, one of the things that, some of my former friends would do are, let's say somebody's going to give, I forgot the guy, I forgot his name, but he's like super, I would say extreme right, not like typical conservative guy. And he was going to go to, I believe it was MIT. I think he was going to go to MIT and give a presentation. And they started a whole campaign to essentially block him from being able to even come to the school. And these were my friends. And I remember, even while I was a part of that group, thinking, well, if you guys actually think that he's so wrong, why not actually confront him? Like, why not actually confront him from just a idea standpoint? Like, okay, I will shut down your idea with better ideas. And I feel like that's one aspect, despite all the other foolishness that I think I was involved in, that's one aspect that I think I generally understood. And it blows my mind the level that we've gone to at this point. At this point, I mean, you have to be like extremely careful about the things that you say. You have to, and also actually, and like even just applying this to myself, right, to hold myself accountable. One of the things that I force myself to do now, and I do this intentionally, is I force myself to have people, whether it's within my circle or acquaintances, etc., who basically to the point of extreme opposite views of me, right, like politically, etc. Right. So I have friends who are like hardcore Republicans. I've always been Republicans. I have friends who, like, their entire family is basically just rednecks and, come from the countryside of Georgia, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the interesting things I get from that is growth. Right. And I find that so important, because even on topics where I have very strong positions on, and even like personal feelings about, a perfect example of that is, let's say, police brutality. I've had a ton of experiences with the police, and none of them have been, good experiences. And so I have a very negative view towards the police, and I mean very negative, right? And it's not because I just decided to, it's because of my experiences with them. But at the same time, I'm able to sit down and have a conversation with a friend of mine who can explain to me why he basically is on the extreme opposite of that. And I have to sit there, despite being uncomfortable in that conversation, and force myself to listen to it, because I find it's important to hear that perspective, right? And I think this is something that we've gone so far away from that. And I think that's sad, because now I'm able to hear, for example, how in his situation, he had a scenario where basically he dealt with a home invasion, and somebody in his home almost got raped, right? And basically the police came right in time. And this is a guy, like the dude who did it. You could look him up. You could look my friend's case up on Google. It's a real thing. And so how could this guy not see the police as heroes, right? Whereas for me, all of my experiences have been negative, but hearing that perspective helps me understand why, politically he's on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, right? But if you just look at it from the social justice warrior standpoint, he must be a racist, or he must hate Black people, or he must. And so it doesn't give you any room for understanding, any room for any legitimate analysis, any room for like, and that sucks, right? Because nobody grows from it. And also the problem is never addressed, essentially. The problem is never addressed because on one hand, you're always going to have, right, the side that's for the police, they're going to feel super attacked, right? Because they feel that let's say, for example, we talk about abolishing police. I've actually heard some, now I don't know what you guys said on that, but I've heard some valid arguments for that. But this on this side, right, on this side, you have this guy who thinks abolishing the police is the worst thing in the world, and he has valid reasons for that, right? Are you willing to listen to his reasons, or is he just immediately racist? How do you even have this conversation if the moment he says he's for the police, you already cancel him? You're already quote unquote triggered, right? And so I actually feel very sad. Like, I legitimately feel very sad where the state of things are. It's in the schools and whatnot. And then in tech, you know, just feeling like a lot of times you're walking on, you know, eggshells, right? You're walking on eggshells, you know, where you can't say something. You have to like watch everything you say, you know, even online. Like if I'm being honest, like some of the a lot of times, I'm gonna finish with this. Like one of the things that I force myself to do, for example, on YouTube, right, is I use my actual name, right? So I actually have my actual name rather than, you know, some fake name, some pseudonym, right? But one of the things that does for me is every time I'm about to type a comment, I have to think twice about it. Every time I'm about to post something, I actually have to think twice about what I'm posting and do I actually stand behind it? Because the reality that we live in is I know somebody could try to cancel me for what I said. Somebody could legitimately try to make me try to attack my livelihood, right? Somebody could legitimately try to cancel me and mess up my job and all of that because, but at the same time, it keeps me honest. It keeps me like, if I'm just hiding behind an avatar and a fake name, then I can say whatever the hell I want. I can, you know, I can make a whole new reality for myself. But if I'm using my own actual name, then I have to think, okay, you have to be careful, Jonathan. You have to, or you have to at least be honest. But then it's like, how honest can you be? So
let me that's a great point. Okay, so Lion Legal, let me ask you this. If it's this simple, because it tends to be in other words, if it's just a question of, well, why don't people just open up to the better arguments, or finding an optimal position, realizing that perhaps there's no solution here, but we can find the best trade-off, blah blah blah. Why don't people believe in arguments, that kind of stuff? Is it really that simple? That's number one, kind of a question I'm asking. And also related to that is, when you see all these kinds of programs kind of permeate through the different HR departments, right, and so on and so forth, is it one of those kind of blind, everybody just copies things because, okay, it's not my business, I'm just gonna click my button on my part of the assembly line, and then things just kind of happen? What exactly is the nature of it here? Because if it seems so simple, logically speaking, what the issue is, or is it more complicated? And what are the mechanisms by which it actually gets propagated through all these systems?
Okay, I think I will. I think there were three issues that you raised. The HR issue: is it simple, and how has it essentially been propagated? So the HR issue is this simplest issue to answer, because everybody in a company will simply follow what HR says they should do, because they get paid by the company. They know that if HR says don't use this word to address these individuals, you have to follow these rules. If they don't do that, they can lose their job. They'll get fired. So they will simply agree immediately, yes, okay. Even if they go home and then they start to use all kinds of profanity and they say that they don't like this group, that group, at the office, they will agree with what HR states. Why has it come about to the point where people cannot really have debate? Because of a lot of historical context around why these rules were put in place in the first case. A lot of protected groups have felt disadvantaged, have felt disenfranchised, and in some cases that is true. However, people have to think, what's the best way to deal with that discourse? Is it by actually talking about it, or is it by trying to vilify anybody that has a differing view of the issue? The problem is that in a place where people are so divided, like the North and the South have completely different cultures, different ideas, different histories too. If you get a situation where people are not used to having discourse and agreeing on issues, they come to a point where they don't even want to have discourse at all. Especially if you've been to the North, you've been to the South, there are some things that you don't even need to discuss. For example, if you're in the South, people will vote for a particular political party. They will have a view about the history of the country, etc. In California and New York, it is entirely different. So I think the historical context is a big part of the reason. For example, if you look at the blackface issue in America, there's been 400 years of slavery. There's been a lot of injustice against black people. So it is just considered unacceptable. There is no debate that's going to be had in the States as to why anybody should be allowed to put on blackface. It is not even a topic discussed. In Australia, they used to do this a lot on TV shows, etc. People did not have the same historical, point like the reference. So it was seen as essentially it meant something entirely different there. I think in Holland as well. Holland, they have a day, like a parade, where everybody dresses up in blackface. So that just shows, going from country to country, the difference that there is, and the fact that there might be a discussion in those places, but in America, due to the history, there is no point in even having a discussion in most people's eyes. So I think historical context shows why we have got to the point where people are not even prepared to discuss these issues anymore. It's either right or wrong. I'm not saying that I agree with blackface at all, because I think that it's a disgusting thing to do. But I'm just using that as an example, the historical context.
Go ahead, Ike.
What's the next stage, right? So if the path is laid out that way, then and you understand why it has to be that way given historical context. Okay, what's the next stage of the historical
privately saga? I think in private companies, anytime anybody gets a job, they accept they're not simply getting a job. You can go to a company where people allow you to say these things. Okay. There are certain news organizations that are incredibly right-wing, left-wing, etc. You can figure out the company that you would like to go to. So if a company as a private entity wants to control the kind of speech that you spew, fine. Okay, cool. In a university, that's a different thing. Unfortunately, you have to be a lot more tolerant in that setting. You don't get to make the rules. You don't get to say, you can never say this to me. You can never say, in my view, a larger leeway that should be there. And it's not simply because you give people the right to say this or say that. It's also because as a student, if you want to truly get to the intellectual capacity that brought you to higher education in the first place, you should understand how to marshal arguments, how to debate, how to exchange ideas. Unfortunately, that's the whole point of being there in the first place. That's the whole point of being in higher education. So how can you now go there and say that everybody must agree with your point of view on your political views? It doesn't make sense. So as far as higher education is concerned, you should be prepared to debate. And even if a person comes there with an opposing view, it's entirely possible that, for example, there are some former world leaders that have been accused of human rights abuses, and they go to campuses, university campuses, and they say, no, they're not allowed to. Look, 99.9% of people there will disagree with that guy that's talking. Most of the people that listen to him will say, this guy is an example of evil. But by listening to him, you can understand how to prevent another person like that being able to entrench themselves in power, being able to get into power, because they don't assume power in impoverished countries by accident. They understand the way that the system works. They understand how to get along with people. They use their charisma. They use a lot of, possibly bribes, etc. So even having discourse allows you to gain information as to how to prevent a lot of negative views being able to come to the fore. But if you don't do that, then you drive a lot of these views on the ground, and that's what you don't want to do.
So one point I wanted to make actually is that it also actually has a very, in my opinion, laughably counter effect, right? Because I'll give you two perfect examples. So the first example is when you let's take the police brutality again, right? Let's take that, since that's that's a hot topic. We had the George Floyd situation and all that, right? I had a conversation with one of my colleagues. He's a Republican, and because of the types of conversation we're able to have, right? He's actually a colleague, but he understands that he understands that, ironically, that when he's talking to me, it's a safe space. Okay, so he can say he can state how he feels, and I'm not going to just be triggered, right? And one of the things I gained through that conversation with him is that, and it's not just him, but is that a lot of people on the right, they actually understand that there is a problem, right? They actually understand that there is a problem. They see the problem. The issue is we've reached such a level of polarization that they feel the need to pick a side. It becomes a us versus them issue, right? So because of the lack of discourse, right, we can't even see the places where we might agree so that we can address those things. And so, in other words, he feels the need to say, I side with the police, right? He feels the need to say that, even though he does understand, hey, you're my colleague and I care about you. And he means that genuinely. I know he means that genuinely. You're my colleague. I care about you. And I understand the experiences you've had with police, and you should not have these experiences, right? And I understand you shouldn't have these experiences. I think it's terrible. And I think those cops should be fired. I think they shouldn't even get a job in the first place. And to hear him say all these things, but the thing is, he would not say those things publicly. He would not say the opposite publicly, but he also would not state publicly that he sees those things, because it's almost like he's immediately picking the side that he doesn't even want to pick a side, but he has to. You live in a world now where, because of the lack of discourse, you have to pick a side, and so it creates the opposite effect. It's kind of mind blowing how I feel like we don't realize, at least a lot of our population, specifically here in America, but not just in America, don't realize this. And another example of this is, let's say, guns in America, right? That's a touchy topic, and this is one I actually have very interesting views on, because I'm a permit holder, right? Multiple states. I actually like shooting guns, and I know a little bit about guns, right? And one interesting thing that I found is that, like, I'm a member of the NRA, right? And yet they're an organization that I actually really don't like. And so somebody may think, okay, that's contradictory. Why would you be a member of an organization that you don't like? And the thing is, because at the end of the day, I see how, for example, in cases where they could defend, let's say, somebody who's black, who's in a situation where they had a permit, they had all their ducks in a row, they don't defend them, right? They stay behind, partially because of the first reason I mentioned, right? Because they feel like they'll be picking a side, which sucks. But basically, one of the reasons I'm a member is because, and this is the reason, for example, that a lot of people on the right and the left, they constantly going at it without realizing certain things, is that the constant, there's this feeling, right? When you care about gun rights, when you care about your right to protect yourself and your loved ones, there's this feeling, right? This constant feeling that there are these groups of people who know very little about guns, right? Who want to take that right away from you. Now, you could get into the weeds about whether or not they can do that, how the extent to which they could do that, right? But there's this feeling, right? When you hear, somebody like Stacey Abrams say that an AR-15 is a weapon of mass destruction, it's like, that sounds a little bit lunatic, right? That's not even close to true. Or when you hear Beto O'Rourke say, yes, we will take your guns, we will take your AR-15s, and while he's saying that, I look over and my AR-15 is on the wall. Like, that's a little bit. Do you get what I'm saying? So because of that, even though, yes, of course, most of us, in fact, most gun owners want people to be responsible. If you ever take a gun class, right? And I'm taking these examples to give you real examples. Like, if you ever take any gun courses, the first thing they talk about is safety. Safety is such an important thing. If you go to a gun range and you don't exhibit safety, they kick your ass out, right? And so the point I'm making is that most gun owners, most responsible gun owners, actually care about people not losing their lives to senseless violence, and they actually want you to fight the criminals, to prevent the mass shooters, to prevent all that stuff. But because we can never figure out the baseline, right? We can never figure out baselines. We can never have that discourse to understand, why are the people on the right like this? Why would a guy who's a black man who doesn't like the NRA become a member of the NRA, right? It's hard to wrap your mind around that. But the reason is because NRA is the only force that actually is, whether you like them or not, they're successfully fighting this shit off, right? And so it kind of like this, it's this thing where I think a lot of times in American society, what I'm realizing is the lack of discourse.
I just want to add something after you're done. But
yeah. So I've noticed that in American society, like the fact that we're unwilling to debate each other, we're unwilling to talk about things, even if they make us uncomfortable. We've gotten to this point where we're not even being able to establish baselines and understanding. And so we're never going to touch on the issue. And so you're always going to have a side that's against guns, a side that thinks that the other side doesn't care about kids dying, which is not true. If you ever go to any gun range, anytime there's like a mass shooting, in fact, responsible gun owners, they actually feel the brunt of it because they know they're going to be blamed. The moment something bad happens, you already know it's going to turn on the NRA supporters and all the gun owners, right? So you wish it wouldn't happen, but no one gets to hear that side, right? And so because there's, again, constant bickering at each other, right? So anyway, that's my stance. So I do feel that it's just horrible that I wish we were going the opposite direction of where we're going now, because it's creating a lot of people who are becoming essentially more bullies, right? Like it's like a bully culture rather than, hey, let's talk about this. No, let's bully you to the point of, and the reality is you're not getting people to agree with you. You're just silencing them. And that's when you create the Donald Trump effect, right? Because you have all these people who have the feelings, and those feelings don't just go away because you shamed them and bullied them and you think you did it into submission. No, you end up with 70 million people voting for him. That's what you end up with. So
Okay.
Yes, and Lion Legal, go ahead and add what
let me not interrupt you because I was about to make 2 points. So please continue.
No, you go ahead and make your points because a lot of things were mentioned.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Right.
All right. So,
and I didn't want to go ahead.
Sorry for going off like that.
So the issue is that when you allow opposing sides speak, you can see if a lot of them are spouting absolute nonsense. For example, there's a right-wing guy called Spencer something, and he was saying that that the country was not even built by the slaves, etc. Factually, that is untrue. A lot of the country was built by slaves creating the physical infrastructure. That's a fact. So when you allow people that have, abhorrent views to actually express their views, you can actually refute a lot of what they say with facts. And most people who understand that what they're saying is untrue are just going to completely dismiss it. Whereas if you drive those instincts and views on the ground, then I think that it can increase the appeal to people that are not truly informed about the nonsense that they're actually talking about. Plus, there are points where you get people who might have opposing views, but they still say a lot of stuff which you may agree with from time to time. There are authors, for example, Jordan Peterson. I don't agree with everything that he says. I think a lot of it is a little bit extreme, especially his views on IQ, things of that sort. But other parts of his comments, I can say, okay, this is clearly an intelligent guy. This is a guy who I would class as having high intelligence and having a lot of interesting views, although I don't agree with everything that he states. And I think intelligent people can do that. They can say, I don't agree with everything that somebody on the opposing side states, but there are points that you make which I do agree with.
So do you think, because you mentioned Jordan Peterson, for example, and there has been this whole point of, well, if it's so simple as, well, people just need to recognize that, you're going to have opposing views and you need to listen, so on and so forth. Do you think conversations of this sort, or the rise of a Jordan Peterson, at least within the space of the media, does that help at all? Or does that just become a little side issue, some little entertainment? It's never going to be understood. Everyone, for example, is going to be lumped into this category of some phobe or ism, right? Or ist, sexist, racist, xenophobe, sexist, whatever.
I think that the conversation that we have now is incredibly helpful. The problem with Jordan Peterson, etc., is that people who listen to him listen to everything that he states, and they don't have a counterpoint. At least, given that we are all discussing an issue here, if there's any issue that someone else disagrees with, they have a counterpoint. There are a lot of Black intellectuals that don't go on and debate Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, etc., all of the other intellectuals that you see coming from the right wing. So it's not enough to simply have a figure who has a particular view and they sell books, etc. There always has to be a counterbalance. That's why if you look at political systems, there's an opposing party. You need that opposing party because that creates for greater accountability. Without that, you may have an incredibly dynamic figure who is charismatic and just leads a whole mass astray.
So ironically though, and I agree with your point about some people who just follow everything one person says. I think in Jordan Peterson's case, it's kind of ironic because one of his main things is the fact that, you know, he doesn't like ideologues, right? And you know, that's also my position in general, right? It's like I don't like people who just have one ultimate position and it's like they don't even try to challenge themselves. In other words, you know, hold themselves accountable to their views, to their political stances, etc. So I generally don't like ideologues myself. You know, I like to see that somebody.
Have you heard what he said about IQ? Have you heard what he said about IQ?
Yes.
What do you think about that? No. Like, you know, about IQ and groups who have, you know, particular IQ.
It's been a while since I watched that talk. I remember him mentioning something about engineers and like he mentioned. It's been a while since I watched that too. So I don't want.
He was saying that like, you know, essentially.
Like he was basically talking about predispositions and stuff like that, right? Am I correct?
No. It was about something else, but you know, I'm not even sure if I should get into it. But it was.
Okay, we probably should not get into.
Let's not get into it because it's very, very. First of all, he's entirely wrong, and like, you know, second of all, it's a bit too controversial to the point that I don't even want to shed light on such.
And at some point, probably a separate show, separate idea to just focus on that one in particular, because the IQ conversation. Because again, I believe in conversations. We've just had a whole long conversation about it, right? About having conversations, right? So it's like, then okay, well, let's have a conversation.
I'm not going to delve into it. But like Ike, like, you know why he's wrong? Because if you look at Nigerians in America and like what they've achieved in education, that already proves he's wrong. But like, that's all I'll say on that topic.
Okay, well, let's let's leave it at that one. And Jonathan, do you have any closing remarks? And then we'll wrap this up.
Sure. I just want to complete essentially what the last thing I was saying is I just really I think I agree, by the way, with Lion Legal that, you know, in a private, you know, organization, at the end of the day, you know, it's at will employment, and, you know, you agree to the terms of the contract, and so, you know, if you if they decide to let you go, then that's their choice. Obviously, there's also federal laws and stuff, so, you know, there's certain reasons they shouldn't. But the point remains. That being said, I think there is something to be said about the fact that it is sad that, you know, people feel the need, and also it's very one-sided. At least this is what I've noticed personally. I could be wrong. I don't know what the stats are on this, but what I've noticed personally in corporate America is that a lot of these conversations, a lot of the people who feel like they're walking on eggshells are people who are, let's say, not liberal, or at least who don't fall on the left. Those are the main people who feel that they're walking on eggshells, right? And and a lot of the ways that help me start seeing that even more clearly is once, you know, like I have certain views that are definitely leftist views, but I also have certain views that are more conservative views. And so being able to see those different perspectives and realizing, wow, you can't even get close to like trying to have this conversation anywhere near the workplace, right? And yet there are some conversations that are very open in the workplace that you can discuss, and, you know, that no one's going to get in trouble for saying them, because it's almost like we've accepted one side's position as what is correct. And I think that's for me is what I find sad. I'm not sure if there's a solution to it. I'm not sure if I know what the solution is to it, but I just find it sad that that's the direction that we're heading in. But I think that the final point that I would make is just that I would hope that more people would choose to, like whether it's study or listen to enough different perspectives that they can make up their own minds on things and that they can continue learning, right? This is why I like this show. Like this is different from other shit I could be watching on YouTube or other things I could be doing. Like I find this very, it helps me, think. It helps me, be an intellectual. Like I think that's important. And you might say something I disagree with. Lion Legal has said multiple things I disagree with here, right? But it helps me see his perspective, and that's fine. That's fine, but I wish we would do that more rather than just have this one position and just say we're right and they're wrong, and not see any type of like a spectrum of ideas, and maybe that, maybe both ideas are good ideas and I just like mine better. But anyway, that's my final point on that.
100%, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Lion Legal and Jonathan.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go ahead.
Another great show. So thank you very much. Have a great night.
All right. Gentlemen and ladies, thanks again. Thanks again, Lion Legal. Thanks again, Jonathan. Always holding it down, always mixing it up nicely. All right. Always mixing it up nicely. So we started out on one end, and as we approach the other end, here comes Chaos Rain hopping in the chat room.
Great. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it short so you can
Go ahead.
It was a very interesting topic. I had to catch the playback on leverage, but you have explained this in previous streams about leverage, not much like in detail tonight. But it's a good show, Ike. Thank you for having me come up. You could close the show up.
Excellent. Thank you very much to KS Rain. Go ahead and subscribe to his channel. All right, you dropping the link?
Oh, you want to drop? Oh, I'll drop it. I'll jump back down and drop it. Don't worry, I got you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, we meandered and we ended up at the topic of free discussion. Open, free discussion, the understanding of how perhaps we got to this point given certain historical events. What could possibly be the next steps? Are they inevitable things? Do these conversations help? Okay, and we started talking about the concept of leverage, how to develop a fulcrum, how to exercise the seesaw kind of leverage, and so on and so forth. But overall, we were having an excellent time back here, which I also hope you guys listening are replicating. An excellent time back here, up here in the downtown LA for the end of 2020. That was the most important part. Because I believe in the principle that says first entertain. In other words, the ability to pass your time without effort, that is entertainment. In other words, the ability to keep people's attention, that is the entertainment aspect of things. And attention is a valuable commodity. And that is why I would like to thank each and every one of you right now in the chat, watching, not in the chat, watching the replays. Thank you very much for the attention. Thank you very much, very, very much for the time. We will be here all week. We will be here all week. Shout out to Christopher York, Mr. Hana in the house, Jonathan in the house. Mr. Snuggles in the house. Chaos Reign channel in the house.
On the shore, relentless in the war, the legions in our hearts, shed waters in our balls, the spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest, the cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand, stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. With the semblance of a blaze, with gratitude and rage, we touch another page with delirious delight, impervious to light. This vitality and might encourages the flight. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand, stand up, make we burn Babylon. Cause I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within.